Are tattoos a sin? I think there's a clear, cut and dry answer for that. There is modern culture, contemporary culture, which begins to get into all deviant ways that are against the will of the Most High. And some of the effects of people's activity remain to be seen immediately, and they don't have any immediate repercussions sometimes. So mankind is void of understanding on whether he should partake or not partake into those activities. Tattoos being one. But what is sin should be the question first. So what is sin? How do we know that if we sin? You know, some people say missing the mark, some people say falling short. People say all different types of things. But there are several biblical definitions of what sin is. The first thing we want to do is look at 1 John chapter 3 and verse 4. And it says here in 1 John chapter 3 and verse 4, whosoever committeth sin whosoever committeth sin transgresses the law. Whosoever committeth sin transgresses the law. For sin is the transgression of the law. So if you're driving 30 miles an hour in a school zone that says only 15 miles an hour, and you get pulled over, you have transgressed the law. But if you're doing 30 in a 30 or 29 in a 30, where the speed limit is 30 miles per hour, then you have broke no law. So sin is the transgression of the law. So the law, where is the law found? Well, it's not commonly found in any of the Gospels or any of the written law, if you would, or the New Testament itself. It's talked about sometimes in different forms, but the law itself is written in the Old Testament. A complete work, Old and New, Hebrew scriptures, Greek scriptures, the Bible as we know it. So the first thing I want to address is that sin is the transgression of the law. Sin is the transgression of the law. Let's look at Romans and see what the Apostle Paul had to say. Because John said that. Let's see if the Apostle Paul agreed with that. See if the Apostle Paul agreed with what was being said here. So Romans chapter 5 and verse 11. Romans chapter 5 and I'll start at verse 12. It says, wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for all have sinned. Let's notice verse 13. For unto the law sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law. So you can't account for sin where there is no law. So is wearing or obtaining or getting a tattoo a sin? Well, does the law say not to get a tattoo? Because again, you can't account sin where there's no law. That way, that's why people go to court with attorneys and such, because they want to find out, well, did my client break the law? And then they'll go through the process of finding out, hey, no law was broken, let them go free. So sin, in the judge of all the earth's eyes, is a transgression of his law. So let's look at the law and see what it says. And quite plainly, the law dictates that we should not obtain tattoos. Leviticus chapter 19, this is the law, the Torah. This represents the government of God, represents the order in which all the earth should be structured after. And when you have this law enacted, you don't have the troubles you have in the world today, where people are confused and 1% of the population has 99% of the wealth. That's unrighteous and unjust, but the law sets all these things in balance where everybody is taken care of in a just, equitable, socialist system. Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 28, it says here, Ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead. So some occult practices cut their flesh for the dead. He said, don't do that. That's out of the question. Nor print any marks upon you. I am the Lord. So you don't do one and you don't do the other. He said, you don't make cuttings in your flesh for the dead, and you sure do not print marks on your body. This is a law. Now, right under that, it says, do not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to be a whore. Tattoos, prostitution, these are all laws, right? So some people say, well, prostitute your daughter. I wouldn't do that. Well, if you give her a condom or encourage her to go out with males or, accept gifts from guys to court your daughter or take her out and she's back all hours of the night and she's being involved in lewd activities. My point in saying that is that is just a law not to prostitute your daughters. Is not printing marks on your bodies is a law. Or regarding after familiar spirits and also keeping the Sabbath. All of these are laws. So don't regard after familiar spirits, observe the Sabbath, reverence the sanctuary. These are laws. So getting a tattoo, is that biblical? No. It is against the law of God. And is it a sin? Yes, because it violates the law of God. It is a sin. Again, we looked at 1 John 3 and 4, and we found out what sin is. So we thank you for that question, and we'll take the next question.